Let's get real. Your emotions don't care about your goals. They don't care about your commitments, your growth, or your future. They only care about right now. But here's the truth. If you keep letting how you feel decide what you do, you will stay stuck. Today is the day you stop letting emotions run the show. Today, you learn how to train your mind to take control, not just when life is calm, but especially when it's hard. Because the difference between people who grow and people who stay stuck is who they let sit in the driver's seat. Most people live their entire lives reacting to what they feel without ever asking where those feelings come from or if they even make sense. This is where the chaos begins. Because what you feel and what you think, they're not the same thing. One is emotional, the other is logical. One is fast, instinctive, automatic. The other is deliberate, slow, and intentional. If you want to train your mind to be stronger than your emotions, the very first step is understanding the difference between the two. Emotions are impulses. They're energy in motion. They come from the most primitive part of your brain, designed to keep you alive, not to make you successful. That part of you doesn't care about your goals, your dreams, or your potential. It cares about safety, comfort, and survival. That's why when you're nervous about public speaking, your palms sweat. When you're faced with risk, you feel fear. Even if that risk is just trying something new, your brain interprets anything unfamiliar as danger. That's an emotional response, not a rational one. Thoughts, on the other hand, are interpretations. They are what you say to yourself after that emotion shows up. They're your internal narration. And the crazy part is, most people never realize they have the ability to challenge or change that narrative. They think, if I feel it, it must be true. But that's a trap. Just because you feel like you're not good enough doesn't mean you aren't. Just because you feel afraid doesn't mean you're in danger. Emotions lie, not because they're evil, but because they're ancient. They're outdated software trying to run your modern life. Let's make this practical. Imagine you get a bad text message. Your stomach drops. That's emotion. Then your mind jumps in. They must hate me. That's a thought. The emotion triggered it, but the thought is your interpretation. That's where you have control. You can pause and say, hold on, maybe this isn't about me. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe I'm assuming something I don't know. That's the power of separating thought from emotion. Because once you recognize that difference, you stop living like a puppet pulled by every emotional string. But here's the problem. Most people never pause. They feel something and they react. Feel anger? Yell. Feel sad? Withdraw. Feel doubt? Quit. That's emotional living, and it's exhausting. You become a prisoner of every feeling that passes through you. You let your worst moods dictate your best opportunities, and that's a life of regret. That's a life where your potential is hijacked by a temporary emotion you never questioned. Training your mind starts with slowing down. When you feel a strong emotion, you need to pause, not react. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Name it, label it. Get specific. Don't just say, I feel bad. Say, I feel embarrassed because I made a mistake. Or I feel anxious because I'm stepping into the unknown. Why does this matter? Because labeling an emotion moves it from the emotional brain to the thinking brain. That alone starts to shift your state of mind. You can't think clearly when you're swimming in emotion, but once you bring it to the surface, you regain control. This is where training begins. You must become a student of your own inner world. Every time you feel something, treat it like data, not a command. Ask yourself, is this emotion based on truth or just on habit? So many of our emotional reactions aren't about the current moment. They're echoes from the past. You're not upset about today's conversation. You're still carrying the rejection from 5 years ago. You're not scared of failing this test. You're still haunted by the time you got laughed at in school. The emotion is old, but because you never pause to examine it, it still drives your behavior. The more you practice this awareness, the more power you gain. You realize that your thoughts are tools. You can shape them, challenge them, replace them. And your emotions, while they deserve to be acknowledged, don't deserve to be in charge. You start to see that you can feel nervous and still speak. You can feel tired and still show up. You can feel fear and still take the leap. Because the goal isn't to eliminate emotion, it's to lead it. This is how strength is built, not by shutting off emotion, but by learning when to listen and when to lead. Your mind becomes the coach, the parent, the steady voice in the storm. It reminds your emotions who's in charge. And with repetition, your default changes. You no longer spiral at every bad mood. You no longer break at every setback. You begin to respond instead of react. And that's what it means to train your mind to be stronger than your emotions, not to silence them, but to outsmart them. And here's the truth. Once you make this shift, everything else changes. Your relationships, your confidence, your ability to handle stress, all of it levels up because you're no longer at the mercy of a bad day or a painful memory or a fleeting mood. You become grounded, stable, focused. And that kind of strength, that kind of inner mastery, that's what builds an unshakable life. Your emotions are not the problem. The problem begins when you start letting them decide how you live your life. Emotions are real, yes. They're powerful, yes. But they're also temporary. And if you let a temporary feeling dictate a permanent decision, you're sabotaging your future. The truth is, emotions can't be avoided. They're part of being human. But they should never have the final say in how you act. What builds your life isn't what you feel in the moment. It's what you do despite how you feel. Think about how many goals have been abandoned because someone didn't feel like it. How many opportunities slipped by because someone was scared? How many relationships were damaged because someone let anger speak for them? It happens every day. Someone gets a spark of motivation, then fear shows up and steals the moment. Someone wants to build a habit, but laziness talks them out of showing up. It's the same pattern again and again. Emotion shows up, discipline disappears. And that's why understanding the difference between emotion and action is so critical. Emotions are internal experiences. They rise, they fall, they shift with your hormones, your environment, your energy, your thoughts. But your actions, those are your decisions. They're under your control, even when it doesn't feel like it. And the more you exercise that control, the stronger you become. This doesn't mean ignoring your emotions or pretending they don't exist. It means acknowledging them without handing them the keys to your life. When sadness tells you to isolate, you don't have to listen. When fear tells you to shrink, you don't have to obey. When frustration tells you to give up, you can override it. That's the power you were born with. You just haven't been taught how to use it. Most people never practice emotional override. They've been reacting their entire lives. Stimulus, reaction, trigger, explosion, discomfort, escape. And every time they do it, they reinforce the idea that emotions control them, that if they feel it, they must act on it. But here's what they never learned. Every time you act against what your emotion is telling you, you grow stronger. Every single time. When anxiety says don't speak and you speak anyway, you grow. When exhaustion says skip the workout and you go anyway, you win. Not because it felt good, but because you reclaimed control. Your emotions are not your compass. They're not always accurate. They're often based on old wounds, outdated beliefs, or even just a bad night's sleep. But your actions are your vote for the life you want. Every time you choose consistency over comfort, progress over procrastination, growth over fear, you are shaping the direction of your life. Now here's the catch. It doesn't feel good in the moment. Acting against emotion feels uncomfortable. It feels unnatural. You'll feel resistance. That's normal. That's the signal that you're stepping into strength. Weakness is easy. Giving in is automatic. Strength feels heavy. But if you practice it enough, It becomes your new normal. The discomfort fades. The pride remains. You don't train your mind by waiting for the perfect emotional state. You train it by moving forward regardless of the emotional state. You learn to show up even when it's hard. You learn to be kind even when you're angry. You learn to keep promises to yourself even when you're tired. That's what creates confidence. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in the presence of it. And if you do this every day, if you keep taking action that serves your future instead of reacting to emotions that serve the moment, everything changes. Your mindset gets stronger, your habits lock in, your self-trust skyrockets. And over time, you stop being someone who tries to be disciplined, you become someone who is disciplined. Not because you don't feel negative emotions anymore, but because you don't let them control you anymore. It's not about being emotionless, it's about being emotionally intelligent. It's about being wise enough to say, this is how I feel, but this is what I'll do. That is the mindset of someone who wins. That's the mindset of someone who gets up every time they fall, who keeps pushing even when it hurts, who creates a life based on vision, not mood. Because the truth is, your emotions will pass. The anger will cool down. The fear will subside. The self-doubt will fade. But what you do in those moments, that's what sticks. That's what compounds. That's what builds your future. So don't wait to feel ready. Don't wait to feel brave. Don't wait for the emotion to disappear. Take the action anyway. And in doing so, you train your mind to lead your life, not your feelings. That's how strong people are built, one decision at a time. You can't train your mind if you don't even realize what it's doing. That's why awareness isn't just a concept, it's the core of mental strength. Think about it. How often do you go through your day reacting on autopilot? You get a text that annoys you and suddenly your whole mood shifts. Someone cuts you off in traffic and your blood pressure spikes. You feel tired, overwhelmed, irritated, and you assume that means something's wrong. You never question it. You just react. But here's the truth. You will never have power over your emotions if you are not aware of them when they show up. Most people live their entire lives being owned by how they feel. They don't notice their emotional patterns. They don't observe the triggers. And because of that, they stay stuck mentally, emotionally, and sometimes even physically. Now, awareness is not about overanalyzing everything you think or feel. It's about noticing without judgment. You start becoming an observer of your own mind instead of a prisoner of it. When something triggers you, instead of immediately reacting, you pause. You ask yourself, what am I actually feeling right now? Why am I feeling it? Is it based on fact or assumption? That pause is everything, because inside that pause, you take your power back. You start learning the difference between a true threat and an emotional overreaction. And let me be clear, doesn't mean your emotions aren't real. They are. But real doesn't mean accurate. Just because you feel rejected doesn't mean you are. Just because you feel like a failure doesn't mean you've failed. Just because your brain is telling you it's too late doesn't make it true. But you won't know that if you don't slow down enough to hear the voice in your head and call it out. That's why self-awareness is a superpower. It gives you options. When you're aware of your inner state, you can choose a better action, a better word, a better path forward. And that's the difference between being reactive and being intentional. Training your mind to be stronger than your emotions starts with this internal habit of catching yourself in the moment. That means becoming conscious of your tone when you speak, noticing when your energy shifts, recognizing when your heart starts racing. Instead of spiraling, you breathe. You notice. You label what you feel: anxiety, fear, insecurity, anger. And just that act, naming it, breaks the cycle. Because now, instead of being consumed by emotion, you're interacting with it. You're separating you from the feeling. That's how you gain control. The strongest people aren't those who never feel weak. They're the ones who recognize their weakness in the moment and don't let it steer the ship. And the good news, awareness can be trained. You can practice it in small ways every day. Pay attention to how you talk to yourself. Catch the stories you tell when something doesn't go your way. Start to track your emotional habits. Do you shut down when criticized? Do you get defensive when you feel overlooked? These are patterns, not personality traits, and patterns can be changed, but only if you see them. Most people try to control their emotions by suppressing them. They try to bury the anxiety, deny the anger, ignore the fear, but what you resist will always persist. You can't fight what you refuse to face. So face it. Be honest about what you're feeling, even if it's messy, especially when it's messy, because that's where the work is. This process takes effort. It's not always comfortable. But every time you choose to see your emotional response instead of just reacting from it, you create a new pathway in your brain. Over time, your default reaction starts to shift. You become less impulsive, more grounded, more in control, not because life gets easier, but because your mind gets sharper. You don't get mentally strong by avoiding feelings. You get strong by facing them, understanding them, and refusing to be ruled by them. And it all starts with awareness. You want to be the kind of person who doesn't get thrown off by a bad morning. You want to be someone who leads even when things fall apart. Then practice awareness. Train yourself to check in with your inner world just as often as you check your phone. Because once you become the observer of your emotions instead of their victim, everything changes. You stop reacting, you start choosing. And choice, that moment of conscious action, is where real power lives. Your awareness is the gateway to discipline, clarity, peace, and strength. And no one can give that to you. You build it moment by moment, day by day. Awareness is not a trick, it's a tool. And when you learn how to use it, you stop letting your emotions dictate your future. You take the lead. Imagine this, someone says something that irritates you, and before you can even think, you've already reacted, snapped, lashed out, maybe said something you regret. Or maybe you're in a situation that feels uncomfortable and your anxiety takes over before you even realize what's happening. That's not because you're weak or broken, it's because you haven't trained your mind to pause. You haven't built the muscle that gives you space between the trigger and your response. That tiny gap, the moment between something happening and what you do about it, is the single most powerful moment of your day. It's where growth lives. It's where transformation happens, and most people skip right over it. Every time something triggers you and you immediately react, you give up control. You let the emotion make the decision, and that becomes a habit. Over time, you don't even realize that you're reacting on autopilot. Your brain isn't making the decisions anymore, your emotions are. But here's the truth. You can train yourself to interrupt that process. You can train your mind to create space before you react. That's not something you're born with, it's something you build. It starts with recognizing that you are not your emotions. You are not the anger. You are not the anxiety. You are not the panic or the sadness. You are the one experiencing those emotions. And because you're the one experiencing them, you have the power to choose what happens next. That choice doesn't happen in the emotion, it happens in the pause. And most people never slow down long enough to even notice it's there. That pause is uncomfortable. It feels unnatural at first. Your body wants to react. It wants to say something, do something, move, escape, yell, cry, anything but sit with the feeling. But when you force yourself to pause, to breathe, to count to 5, to walk away for a second, you reclaim the power to choose your response. And that one choice, repeated over and over, begins to rewire how you operate. You're not ignoring your emotions. You're just refusing to be ruled by them. You can feel anger without yelling. You can feel fear without running. You can feel sadness without collapsing. That's strength. And that strength comes from training. Just like lifting weights, you build it by pushing through resistance. The resistance is the urge to react. Every time you override it with a conscious choice, your mind gets stronger. You teach your brain, I am in charge. I respond. I don't just react. The brain is constantly forming habits. If you always react in the same way, your brain wires that as the default path. It becomes easier and faster to do it next time, but the same is true for pausing. The more you train yourself to pause, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, your brain will create a new path, one where the pause becomes automatic. That's when things change. That's when you stop living at the mercy of your emotions and start living with purpose. But let's be real. This is not easy. You will mess up. You will react without thinking. You will catch yourself after the fact. That's okay, because even catching yourself after you've reacted is part of the training. That moment of reflection is awareness, and awareness is the beginning of change. The goal is not perfection. The goal is progress. To make the space between trigger and reaction bigger, longer, more conscious. Even a 1-second pause is a win. 1 second of choice is more powerful than a lifetime of reactivity. You won't always feel in control. You won't always feel strong. But control doesn't start with feeling. It starts with training. Think of it like a mental emergency brake. At first, it takes effort to pull it. You have to remind yourself. You have to fight the urge. But over time, that mental brake becomes easier to reach. Eventually, it becomes second nature. That's when you stop living reactively and start living intentionally. When something triggers you, instead of spiraling into emotion, ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling it? What's the best response, not the easiest one? That's how leaders think. That's how growth-minded people operate. And that's how you begin to build a mind that's stronger than the moment. Don't underestimate this. People change their lives not by avoiding triggers, but by changing their response to them. And that response lives in the pause. That pause is your power. That pause is your breakthrough. That pause is the space where the person you want to become gets a chance to show up. Train yourself to use it. Every day in small ways, when someone cuts you off in traffic, when you get bad news, when someone pushes your buttons, when fear shows up, stop, breathe, notice, choose. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes, and one day you'll realize your emotions no longer control you. You control how you respond to life, and that changes everything. You can't stop emotions from showing up. No matter how mentally strong or disciplined you become, emotions will always be part of your life. They're hardwired into your brain. Fear, anxiety, anger, sadness. These emotions aren't flaws, they're signals. But here's the truth most people never learn. Just because an emotion shows up doesn't mean it gets to take over. You have the ability to reframe it, to assign it a new meaning. And that shift changes everything. Think about it. Two people can feel the same emotion, let's say fear, and do completely different things with it. One runs away, shuts down, avoids the situation. The other leans in, uses the adrenaline, channels the energy into focused action. The fear is the same. The interpretation is different. That's what reframing is. It's the skill of translating emotion into power instead of paralysis. It starts with awareness. Most people are so fused with their emotions, they don't realize they have a choice in how to interpret them. They feel nervous and immediately think, I can't handle this. They feel angry and think this person is against me. But those interpretations are automatic, not facts. They're habits of thinking. And like all habits, they can be broken and replaced. Let's take anxiety, for example. You feel it in your chest, tightness, a racing heart, a stomach drop. The typical reaction is something's wrong. I'm not ready. I need to escape. But what if you paused, took a breath, and reframed that feeling? What if you said, this is energy. This means I care. This is my body preparing to perform. Suddenly that emotion becomes fuel. You're not suppressing it. You're redirecting it. This isn't about lying to yourself. It's about owning the truth that emotions are neutral until you assign them meaning. Reframing is how you take back control of that meaning. And the more you practice, the easier it gets. You stop being a prisoner of your emotional state and start becoming the author of your mental experience. You have to understand, reframing doesn't eliminate the emotion, it integrates it. You're still going to feel things. You're still going to get overwhelmed or frustrated or scared. But instead of those feelings derailing you, you use them as cues. A trigger becomes a tool. A problem becomes a prompt. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You start asking, what can I learn from this? Or how can I grow through this? One of the most powerful shifts you can make is seeing every emotion as a messenger, not a master. When you feel self-doubt, instead of spiraling into shame, pause and listen. What is it trying to protect you from? What old story is it replaying? And more importantly, what new story can you choose instead? You are not obligated to keep thinking the same way just because it's familiar. This kind of reframing takes practice, especially in the heat of the moment. It won't feel natural at first. Your default might still be avoidance or overreaction, but the key is to catch yourself quicker each time. Interrupt the old narrative, insert a new one, even if it's just a small shift, like going from I'm a failure to I'm learning. That change compounds. You're wiring a stronger, wiser, more resilient version of yourself every time you do it. One powerful way to support this process is by speaking your reframes out loud. When you catch yourself in a negative loop, say something different. This is hard, but I can figure it out. I'm scared, but I'll move anyway. I feel overwhelmed, so I need to simplify. When you speak it, you reinforce it. Your brain listens to the language you use. It takes direction from your words. Also remember, reframing is not about fake positivity. You're not pretending everything is okay. You're choosing to respond in a way that aligns with your strength, not your fear. That's real power. You can acknowledge pain and still move forward. You can feel anger and still show up with purpose. The more you practice emotional reframing, the more you develop emotional agility. You stop getting stuck in moods or triggers. You stop making decisions based on momentary feelings. You stop sabotaging your goals just because the path feels uncomfortable. And eventually, you become someone who doesn't just feel strong, you become someone who acts from strength, regardless of how you feel. That's the goal. Not emotional perfection, not pretending emotions don't exist, but mastering the art of navigating them with clarity, calm, and confidence. You can't always control what you feel, but you can always control what you do with what you feel. And that's how your mind becomes stronger than your emotions. Not by avoiding them, not by suppressing them, but by reframing them again and again until your mind is leading, not following. Discipline is not about being perfect. It's not about being in the mood or feeling inspired every day. It's about doing what needs to be done, even when every cell in your body screams for comfort. That's how mental strength is built. Not through motivation, but through daily repetition of hard choices. When you make discipline a lifestyle, it stops being punishment and starts becoming power. Most people think mental strength is something you're either born with or not. That's false. It's built the same way you build physical strength. One rep at a time, one hard decision at a time. Every time you get up when it's easier to hit snooze, you're training your brain to follow your goals, not your feelings. Every time you choose the salad over the fast food, go to the gym when you'd rather scroll on your phone, say no when you want to people please, speak up when it's easier to stay quiet, you're reinforcing the kind of identity that says, I do hard things. That repetition rewires your brain. It stops looking for the easy route and starts seeking the right one. The reason most people struggle isn't because they're lazy, it's because they only act when they feel like it. But feelings are fleeting. They shift with your mood, your sleep, your hormones, your environment. If your actions are based on that, your life will always be inconsistent. One great day followed by a week of emotional recovery. That's not growth. Growth happens when you create a structure and stick to it, a structure that says, I move whether I'm motivated or not. I show up whether I'm confident or scared. I execute the plan, not because I feel good, but because I made a promise to myself. That promise is what discipline is rooted in. It's self-respect in motion. When you break your own standards, you break trust with yourself. But every day you keep a commitment, no matter how small, you build credibility. And over time, that self-trust becomes unshakable. That's how you stop depending on external validation. You don't need people to believe in you when you've proven to yourself that you'll keep going no matter what. Discipline also creates freedom. It sounds backward, but it's true. When your day is shaped by discipline, you remove the chaos that emotions bring. You don't wake up and wonder what kind of day it'll be. You create it. That control doesn't come from rigid routines or extreme perfectionism. It comes from clarity and consistency. When you know your priorities and you protect them with action, you don't waste time, energy, or confidence. You move forward, even when the world around you feels shaky. You become grounded. That stability is what makes your mind stronger than your moods. And yes, it's uncomfortable at first. Your brain will resist. It's wired for ease, for comfort, for pleasure. But that's exactly why discipline is powerful. It goes against your default. And anything that interrupts your default creates growth. It teaches your brain, we don't run from discomfort, we rise through it. Discipline is like lifting mental weights. At first, it feels impossible. Then, with repetition, it gets easier. Eventually, what once felt like a huge sacrifice becomes your new normal. And that's when life changes. People will say, but I'm just not that kind of person. That's not true. You've just practiced inconsistency longer than you've practiced discipline. Switch the reps. Start with one hard thing a day, one thing you normally avoid, one thing that pushes you to be a little uncomfortable. Then do it again the next day and the next. Watch how your mind begins to shift, how your tolerance for discomfort grows, how your ability to focus, to stay calm, to follow through becomes sharper. The strongest people aren't the ones who feel strong every day. They're the ones who have trained their mind to act with strength, even when they feel weak. They've built discipline so deeply into their lives that quitting is no longer the default reaction. Their habits take over, their standards take over. That's not magic. That's not luck. That's discipline. So stop looking for the perfect plan. Stop waiting for motivation to strike. Start with what you can control, your actions, your choices, your attitude. That's the training ground for mental strength. Discipline is the quiet force that separates those who live by emotion from those who live by purpose. It won't always feel good, but it will always be worth it. Because once discipline becomes your foundation, your emotions will no longer dictate your destiny. You will. Your environment is not neutral. Every room you walk into, every voice you listen to, every screen you scroll, it all trains your mind in one direction or another. Either it's making you stronger, more focused, more disciplined, or it's pulling you into patterns of distraction, reactivity, and emotional chaos. What most people don't realize is that their mental strength isn't just about what they do, it's also about what they surround themselves with. You could have the best intentions, the clearest goals, and the strongest willpower, but if you're in an environment that constantly bombards you with negativity, noise, and emotional triggers, your progress will always be harder than it has to be. Your mind is like a sponge. It soaks in what it's around. You become what you hear, what you see, what you repeatedly tolerate. So if you're serious about training your mind to be stronger than your emotions, you need to audit what you let into your world. Think about the people in your life. Who are the ones constantly complaining, always focused on problems instead of solutions? Who's always gossiping, always negative, always emotionally reactive? Now think about how you feel after spending time with them. Do you feel clearer, stronger, more grounded, or do you walk away drained, overwhelmed, uncertain? That's not by accident. That's the result of emotional energy rubbing off on you. You can't grow into a mentally tough version of yourself if you're surrounded by people who are emotionally fragile, dramatic, or addicted to chaos. Now consider your digital environment. What's on your feed? What kind of content are you consuming? Is it fueling your mind or numbing it? Are you learning something that sharpens you, or are you doom scrolling because your emotions are in control and your mind is exhausted? Social media trains your emotional system every time you open it. The algorithm is built to hijack your attention, to feed your insecurities, to keep you in a loop of reaction. If you don't intentionally take control of it, it will train your brain to be impulsive, anxious, and constantly comparing your life to someone else's highlight reel. Your physical space matters too. Is your environment clean or cluttered, organized or chaotic? The state of your space is often a mirror of your mind. If your room is a mess, your brain stays in a subtle state of tension. You don't even notice it consciously, but it makes it harder to focus, harder to stay calm, harder to stay emotionally regulated. Mental clarity starts with physical clarity. And that doesn't mean being perfect. It means being intentional, creating a space where your mind can breathe, focus, and lead. Even your routines are part of your environment. The sounds you wake up to, the first things you see in the morning, the way you spend your first 10 minutes of the day. Most people wake up and instantly hand their brain over to external noise, emails, notifications, scrolling. That's training your mind to be reactive from the second you open your eyes. But if you want strength, you start your day with control, with silence, with gratitude, with direction. Because what you do first sets the tone for everything that follows. All of this matters because emotional strength doesn't happen in a vacuum. You can't meditate for 10 minutes a day and expect to be calm if you spend the rest of your day in chaos. You can't read a self-help book once a week and expect to override the emotional programming you're getting from your friends, your feed, your job, your habits. You are constantly being trained by everything around you. So the question is, are you choosing that training, or are you letting it choose you? Changing your environment doesn't mean cutting everyone off or becoming a monk. It means making small, powerful choices. Spend more time with people who think deeply, who speak with intention, who value emotional growth. Unfollow accounts that make you feel less and replace them with voices that challenge you to rise. Turn off the noise and spend time in silence. Declutter one drawer, then one room. Take control of your inputs so that your mind can operate with clarity. Because the truth is, it's hard to be mentally strong when you're constantly surrounded by mental clutter. You can't grow into your best self while staying planted in the same toxic soil. You have to be willing to choose discomfort in your environment. Whether that's walking away from draining relationships, changing your habits, or reshaping your routines if you want your mind to be sharp enough to lead when your emotions are screaming for attention. So ask yourself right now, what